Let's say our confession this morning. I'm a beautiful, wonderful child of God. I'm a friend of God. I'm loved by God. And God likes me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. All things are possible with God. I have great faith and it shows. I make wise decisions. God has awesome plans for my future. You may be seated. Before we get started this morning, I want to say thank you to Lynn for allowing me to fill in for him for a few weeks. I appreciate the fact that you trust me with your people, and hopefully they will have learned something, and they will put some things into practice from what we've talked about. We've been talking about a life of no regrets, and I want to talk today about how do we leave boldly? How do we end this? We've talked about several different things in regards to a life of no regrets. But there's a quote, it says, let's tell our young people that the best books are yet to be written, the best paintings have yet to be painted, the best governments are yet to be formed, the best is yet to be done by them. We're going to talk about legacy and character this morning. What kind of a legacy will you leave when you leave? And when you look at that quote from John Erskine, and he's talking about what will we leave behind? What are we telling the people that will be here after we're gone? Are we kind of putting a cap on them and saying this is as high as you can go? Is there a lid there? Or are there great possibilities that are available? And this principle is the one where, to put it into layman's terms, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is how we put this to work. All the things we've learned, this is how we make this happen. And I don't think there is anybody that doesn't want to leave some kind of a lasting imprint from their life. I don't think we want to just kind of sail through this and just, nobody even knew I was here. Nobody even knew I existed. Now, we may not be in the same category as someone like a Steve Jobs, where he basically changes the world with some of the things that he does. But we all will make an imprint. We all will make an impact on things. Question, you ever made a sandcastle or watched somebody make one? Some people are very intricate in how they do it. They have rooms and they have fences and they have statues and they have all kinds of things that fit together in that sandcastle. But the interesting thing is, you come back the next morning, it's gone. Tide came in, washed it away. It's like you were never even there. And once in a while, we can feel that way in regards to how we live. It's like we go through all these things, we work hard, but then all of a sudden it's like, were we even here? Were we like that sandcastle that got washed away? What kind of a legacy did we leave behind? I mentioned a few weeks ago that everything that we do prospers. Psalm 1 talks about that. Now, that prosperity implies to both good and bad. And when you sow a seed, you don't just reap one plant, you reap a harvest. Same thing is true with the seeds that we sow. Whatever it is that we plant, it comes back more than what we have. If you're watching on TV, that was my jump drive. So obviously you didn't see the quote that was on the screen. But if we give unique service, we'll get a reward. If we are fair, if we're patient, if we're honest, that's what will come back to us. That's what is brought back, but it's brought back multiplied. The harvest is much larger. All right? Let's try this. There we are. We're back to the land of the living. But the key word in all of this is, how do we discipline ourselves to do the things that we know that we need to do? Things require care, they require attention, and they require discipline. And it all starts with our thinking. If your thoughts are not disciplined, then your actions are not. And from that, you get undisciplined results. You don't get what you want, not what you're after. Each book we read gives us new knowledge. Each success that we have creates new ambition within us. It's like, hey, I was able to do that, let me try this. Each challenge, we get a new understanding. Each failure, we get new determination. And I don't think failures are bad. Sometimes we try and skirt around that, but I've learned a lot from the stuff that I've screwed up in my life, and I got a whole boatload of stuff that fits in that category. So everything affects everything else. And if we don't pay attention to this, if we're not disciplined, if we're not focused, if we are not determined, we kind of become familiar with things and we just like bypass it and we sail right on by. But I read this quote, it said, where attention goes, energy flows and results follow. Where attention goes, energy flows and results follow. Or the biblical part is, where your treasure is, there will your heart be. Or where your heart is, there your treasure is. So I think the most valuable form of discipline, and this comes into play with all of this, is what you impose upon yourself. Why would you think so little of yourself that you would not discipline yourself to do the right things, and someone else would have to come along and impose discipline on you to make you do that? There are people that get to the end of their life and they have health issues. Well, they haven't taken care of themselves physically, so now a doctor has to impose discipline on you and say, you know, you got to cut this out and you can't eat that and you can't eat that and you need to start doing this. You don't want that. You don't want to get to the end of your life and realize that you've squandered all your resources. Or let's say you run your credit card bill up. You don't pay it for a while, you're going to get disciplined. You're going to get funny phone calls and nasty letters and all that kind of stuff. People are going to want their money. So you have to be careful from that perspective. Don't be like the guy when he was asked, how long have you worked at this company? And his response was, ever since the boss threatened to fire me. That's not the kind of mentality that you want to have. Each one of us, we have a life that will serve either as an example or a warning. It's our choice. We determine what we want to put out there. Will people look at us and go, I don't want to live like that. That's not where I want to end up. Or will they look at us and go, that's exactly the kind of person I want to model my life after. That's the direction that I want to go. God has put within each of us a desire to live a life that matters, a life that counts. 1 Corinthians 3:12 through 14 talks about what we build upon. Do we build upon wood? Do we build upon hay? Do we build upon stubble? Do we build upon straw? Or is it gold, silver, costly stones? Whatever it is. And every day we are building our legacy. And we are choosing the type of foundation that we build on with every decision that we make. Everything counts. You don't get to say, well, you know what? I can go out on Saturday night or Friday night and do whatever I want and it doesn't matter. It does. It may not matter at that moment. You may not see the result of it at that moment, but everything counts. Every one of those decisions make a difference. And you accumulate those over the course of a lifetime, and all of a sudden, like I said, you get to the end, and you've got a life of regret because you didn't do this, or I made that choice, and that was a really poor one. But there are three materials that will weather the storms of life, that if you're building that so-called sandcastle, that will fit that way. First one are convictions. These are those core values that come from God's word that never change, that are eternal. Isaiah 40, verse 8, the grass withers and the flowers fail, but the word of our God stands forever. Politics change. We've got a new president. Trends change. Fashion change. Pop culture changes. All of those things alter and are different on a regular basis. It's the old phrase, if there's anything that's consistent, it's change. But guess what doesn't change? God's word. What's true today was true 1,000 years ago and will be true should the Lord tarry 1,000 years from now. But we've got to decide where our convictions come from. The Message version of Matthew 7:26 says, but if you just use my words in Bible studies and don't work them into your life, you are like a stupid carpenter who built his house on a sandy beach. You don't want to be that person. You want to build it on the solidarity of God's word. We can't just study the Bible. We have to put it into our life. It has to become a conviction. We have to practice this. If someone gives you, well, let's just say it this way. Let's say before Lynn went on sabbatical, you bought him Arnold Schwarzenegger's bodybuilding encyclopedia. And you said, Pastor Lynn, I want you to study this. I want you to look like Arnold when you come back. Lynn comes back after a few months of being on sabbatical, and he looks the same way he did as when he left. Well, Lynn, did you read the Bible? Did you read that book? Yep. Read it probably 8 or 9 times. Highlighted, underlined, wrote in the margins, took notes, studied the Greek meaning of the words of bodybuilding. Well, did you eat right and go to the gym? Nope. We do the same thing with God's Word. We have a tendency to read this, but we don't practice this. We think we are. James talks about it. He says we're what? Hearers, but not doers. I said to Betty, I said, it's not what we know, it's what we do. We were talking this morning. We can know a lot of stuff, but if we don't do it, if we don't practice it, if we don't put it into use on a daily basis, then we're like that verse, that stupid carpenter who built his house on the sandy beach. A lot of times we will, I look at people and they're like, I just got this new devotional. And I'm happy for them. But I want to ask them, are you going to do what it says in there? Are you going to put it into practice? Or I just got back from this conference. I just got back from this seminar. It was amazing. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to use it? Or is it just going to slide by? The choice is ours, but unfortunately we have a tendency to not put things into practice. We've got notes and notes and notes of stuff. I've got those 10 questions. You can take it with you, but if it ends up somewhere underneath a bunch of stuff on your coffee table, it's not going to do you any good. A belief is something we hold on to, but a conviction is something that holds us. A conviction is something that holds us because it's built on something firm. My favorite quote, not favorite, but probably in the top 5 there by Will Rogers. Don't be the third guy. Okay? Don't be the third guy. But we have to decide, what are we going to build our life upon? What direction are we going to go with this? Number 2 in this, let's talk about character. We talked about convictions. Let's talk about character. God cares about your character because when we die, it's the only thing we take with us. That's it. You will have 3 options when you die that are available. You will leave behind some possessions, you will leave behind some people, and you will leave behind some principles. That's it. People may fight over your possessions. I don't know. Maybe you don't have any. Maybe you willed them all away. That way nobody has to fight over this stuff. There will be people left behind. But what are the principles that you have lived by, that you have instilled in your family, that people have seen modeled by you in public, that people have seen modeled by you within this building, within this church? What are those things? That's your character. That's where that comes from. Romans 8:29, God knew what he was doing from the very beginning. He decided from the outset to shape our lives. He wants to make us look like Christ. And he will chip away all those things that don't look like Christ because he wants our character traits to go that way. Michelangelo, the great sculptor, when they asked him how he made the statue David, he said, I just simply chipped away everything that didn't look like David. It was really simple. Same thing of what Christ is doing with us. God is doing with us. He's saying, I want them to look like Jesus, so I'm going to chip away all the stuff that doesn't look like Jesus. Sounds like fun, huh? That's a good one to sign up for. But that's what God does in our life. All those character traits we have that don't look like Christ, he's like, I got to get rid of these things. I have to remove them. Now, there are 3 tools that God uses in regards to building our character. Number 1 is problems. Glad I came for that this morning. But the key is, what's your perspective on the problem? The problems have a purpose. We don't serve a random God who all of a sudden dishes something out and goes, I didn't have anything else to do, so I'm going to make Gary's life miserable today. That's not how God operates. When God uses things, sometimes he will use small little frustrations. Other times he will use basically a jackhammer to get our attention and to chip some stuff off. Because sometimes we have a lot of excess stuff that needs to be removed, needs to be gotten rid of. Number 2 are pressures. We learn patience under pressure. Again, glad you showed up to learn that one. But the context of patience here, and it comes out of Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit, the context in all of that, it's not just sitting here waiting for this event to pass. What is my attitude? What is my demeanor? What is my character in the midst of this? Am I like a little child, kicking and screaming the whole way through? Or am I looking at this going, okay, what's the purpose behind this? What am I supposed to learn from this, from those pressures? Pressure makes diamonds. It can burst a pipe. Depends on how you look at it. Number 3 are people. We talked about this last week. Remember all those sandpaper kind of people? And the axe people and the skill saw people and the vice grip people and the hatchet people and all those? Yeah. Same thing applies. God uses people. Do you know at least one person that just kind of irritates the daylights out of you? Yeah. I got several. Which means I have much work to be done on me. Even though we always look at those people like, if they would just, huh? And God's up there going, it's not about them, it's about you. So realize that when you have these people that have that tendency to get under your skin, realize God is using them to shape you and to form you more like his Son, Jesus Christ. I want to talk a little bit about integrity and character. At Northrop Aviation, they have a fighter plane division where they make F-18 fighter planes. The rivets that go in the fuselage of their airplanes are packed in dry ice before they are inserted into the plane. Reason being, they need to have the stress tolerance that high in order to handle the pressure that goes when they're at altitude flying at Mach 3. They don't want the plane to come apart. The higher your leadership, the higher your performance, the higher your standards need to be. And that's why they do that with those rivets, but it applies to our lives in the same way. The bigger the organization, the tighter the standards need to be. The higher you go in your position, the higher you go in life, you have more responsibilities and less rights. Unfortunately, we have a tendency, we want to invert that. We're like, okay, if I get the top of the pile at work, if I'm at the top of the organizational chart, then I should have all kinds of rights. No, your rights become very small and you are responsible for a whole lot of stuff. So the higher we go, the tighter the standard needs to be as far as our integrity and our character is concerned. And integrity is simply integrating what you say into your daily life. It's the opposite of hypocrisy. Now, when we talk about integrity, people will talk about ethics, they'll talk about morals, and all those things, they're kind of the same, but they're not. And I want to walk through those and let's explain some of this. Ethics or ethos, it refers to a defined standard of right and wrong, good and evil. A defined standard, not an arbitrary, this is that shifting sand thing. This is defined and this is what it means. In my coaching business, every one of my clients fills out a 3-page document. It's called a personal ethos statement. It's what they stand for. And it's amazing how many people you see in the world today, in and out of the church, they have no earthly idea really what they stand for. Or if you ask them to articulate it, they couldn't tell you. They couldn't put it into words. You need to have an ethos. Morality is a lived standard of right and wrong, good and evil. Integrity means sound, complete, and integrated. Now, to the extent that your ethics and morality are integrated, you have integrity. Here's an opposite kind of an explanation for this. Hitler had integrity. Okay? His ethics was he wanted to kill all the Jews. His morality was he did. In a twisted way, he had integrity because what he said he wanted and what he did were the same. He lived what he said. Now, some of you are going, what? That's kind of a twisted way of looking at it. But it's like the guy who says, I don't lie, I don't cheat, I don't steal. Then he lies, cheats, and steals. Well, he stated what his ethos or his ethics are. I am this. But then his morality, how he lives it, he doesn't do that. So he doesn't have integrity. They don't match up. The ethos, the ethics, and the morality all have to fit together. They have to be integrated. They have to fit in that perspective and go in that direction. You can have a high or you can have a low ethics. You can be moral, you can be immoral. It's your choice. But if you want to live and have integrity, you have to choose your ethics. You have to choose your ethos and live it out each and every day, no matter what. Another thing, and this is one thing that I tell guys, let me talk to you for a second here. Ladies, it's true to you, but in God's scheme of things, it's the Trinity, it's the man, the wife, the children. Are we all on the same page here? We all understand that that's the hierarchy, if I can use that terminology? Gentlemen, you need to have a code of honor of some kind. Again, you define what you stand for. Here's the line in the sand that I absolutely will not cross, irregardless of the pressure and the stress that hits me. Irregardless of the temptation that's thrown in front of me, this is the line that I do not cross. You become honor, you get honor by acting honorably. Not just reading about it. Too many people read it and think that by reading this and understanding this, then I become an honorable person. Then I become a person of integrity. It's not what you know, it's what you do. That's the breakdown in our culture today. Plus, there's a lot of shifting sand that's out there. Excellence in our lives should not just be a buzzword or a catchy little phrase that's out there. It should be a way of life. It should be a blueprint for our thinking and our acting and how we work with people and how we handle those things. It should be an active way of thought that always seeks the best in everything. Get this, regardless of the cost to you. Irregardless of the cost. And it will cost you to have honor. It will cost you to have ethics. It will cost you to have integrity, especially in today's world. Now, let's define a couple of things here. Character. A distinctive mark, a distinctive trait, quality, or attribute, moral constitution, moral or ethical strength, self-discipline. Another one of my favorite quotes, the man of principle never forgets what he is because of what others are. It's easy to do this when there's no pressure on. It's easy to do this when there's nothing that's pushing against you. Do you forget your principles when the opportunity is there? You don't know if you're honest unless you've had a chance to steal. You don't know if you're truthful unless you've had a chance to tell a lie. You don't know. But do you forget your principles because of what goes on around you? We saw this during the political season. Those people that were burning things down and destroying stuff and rioting and carrying on, you can't tell me that was a good principle. That was something that they thought they wanted to live by. But sometimes people will get in situations and it's like you let those principles go. Integrity, a possession of firm principles, the quality of possessing and steadfastly adhering to high moral principles or standards. A precious stone will not lose its shine just because someone drops it in a cesspool. If I have the Hope Diamond in my hand and I drop it in a pile of manure, it's no longer the Hope Diamond? Yeah, it is. It doesn't matter what kind of cesspool you are in. You are still a believer. You are still a child of God. You are still a child of the King. But Rick, you don't know what it's like in my workplace. You don't know how awful it is. Turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 18, and I'll show you an example of a gentleman who lived it out in the midst of a worse condition than maybe anything that you've ever been up against. Remember Ahab and Jezebel in the Old Testament? And Elijah the prophet? Anybody read the Old Testament? You're giving me the deer in the headlights look. I know you've read the story. I know you know these people. Remember Ahab and Jezebel? They were the worst king and queen ever. It states it. It says he was the most evil king ever. Now, the context of this story is Elijah has just prophesied the 3 years of famine. No rain. We got nothing coming. It's ugly coming down the pike. All right? 1 Kings chapter 18, and we'll start at the first verse. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. There's a whole sermon there. Ever been in a dry spot with God? It's like my prayers go about this far, and that's it. Or you read the word and you're like, you're just going through one of those seasons, you're in the desert, you're in the wilderness. 3 years, Elijah didn't hear a word from God, it says. 3 years later, God finally came and talked to Elijah again. Not that he was evil, not that he is sinful. It was just one of those things. But it says, the word came to Elijah, go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria. Here's where it's interesting, verse 3. And Ahab had summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of his palace. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Remember that story. There's 100 prophets left. But what does it say? This guy is working for the most evil CEO in the world at the time. And what does it say? He was in charge of this guy's company. He was in charge of this guy's palace. And it said that he was a devout believer. Don't tell me you can't live righteously, you can't live with integrity, you can't live with character if your boss is completely immoral and unethical. Whoever you might be working for, they're nowhere near what Ahab was. I highly doubt if your boss is just a complete jerk, I highly doubt he's killed off a whole boatload of people. Or she. This is Obadiah, the guy in the minor prophets. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, number 4 in the list. This is the guy. But it says he was a devout believer, and because of his character, because of his integrity, because of his devotion to God, he had risen to be in control of the palace. Ahab, even as ungodly as he was, as blind as he was spiritually, saw that there was something in him. You can correlate this to Joseph. Remember Joseph and Potiphar? Remember Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar? They all rose to be in charge of something. Why? Because they were faithful, they had integrity, and they served God to the best of their ability in the midst of what was a god-awful situation, an unholy situation, and a boss that was completely amoral. You can live this life if you want to, in the midst of, in spite of. But it's up to us. We have to make the choice. And then virtue. General moral excellence, right action and thinking, a specific moral quality regarded as good or meritorious, excellence in general. Dag Hammarskjöld, who used to be Secretary of State decades ago, he said, he who wants to keep his garden tidy doesn't reserve a plot for weeds. Again, you can't write off and say, okay, for the next couple of hours, I'm going to go out and do whatever I want and it doesn't affect me. You can't plant those kind of weeds. You can't plant those seeds and think it's not going to reap a harvest to you. We have to be careful with all of this. This is probably my most favorite quote. Treat a man as he is and he will remain as he is. Treat a man as he could be and should be and he will become what he could be and should be. Do you see potential in people or do you see nothing but a problem? If all you see is a problem, you will treat him or her as he or she is, as opposed to speaking to what they could become. There's potential in all of us, irregardless of what the outside looks like. Over 50 years ago in Malaysia, there was a huge Buddha statue sitting outside the temple covered in concrete. Birds would sit on it and poop on it, and people would throw their trash around the base of it, and it just sat there for decades. And finally, one of the priests hired a cleaning crew to come, and he thought, we got to clean this thing up. Now, I'm not advocating Buddhism, okay? Story only. But in the midst of them taking that statue and moving it to a place where they could clean it, they cracked the outside of the statue, the cement on the outside. You know what they found underneath? An 8-foot-tall, solid gold Buddha statue. There's a lot of people that look like they have nothing but concrete on the outside. There's gold somewhere in there. But we have to treat them as they could be or should be, not as they are. Look for what's good in someone, not what's constantly wrong with them. Now, let me be true confession here. I work at this like all the rest of you. Never think that anybody who ever stands in this position has got it all together. The first one that does, move back because the lightning bolts are coming out of the sky. They're lying to you. We all are in this working mechanism of becoming like Christ, developing those character traits. You have no idea how fast my wife's head shook when I had confessed that. It was like on a string. But this is what I don't want to have happen to you after I leave. This is after they've fed the 5,000, they get in the boat, the story says, and the wind stopped, and Jesus stopped the storm. But look at this in the highlight. For they had not gained any insight from the loaves. He just had fed 5,000 people. They saw him perform this amazing miracle, and it said they gained no insight from the incident of the loaves. I don't want you to walk away from the 3 weeks that I've been here and not get any insight from my teaching. But some of it comes back to, Lord, show me how to apply this. We need to learn how to do this, God. I'm not exactly sure how to walk. I love the information. I love what Rick has given me. How do I walk this out? Guess who's more than willing to help you? Huh? It says the Holy Spirit guides us into all truth. Yeah. He will help you. He will help me to walk this out and to make this happen. I think the wrong question is this. I jotted this down. What can we do to prevent moral decay and its consequences? I think that's the wrong question. This is what I think is the right one. What can we do to motivate and maintain ethical behavior in ourselves and society? What can we do to motivate and maintain ethical behavior in society and in ourselves? I think this is the challenge. This is the challenge of leadership integrity. This is the challenge of businesses. This is the challenge of churches. This is the challenge of parents. This is the challenge of husbands and wives, politicians, coaches, sports people. How do we motivate and maintain ethical integrity, ethical behavior in ourselves and society? You probably all are wondering what these umbrellas are for. I want to talk to the guys. Ladies, just stay with me here. Again, I'll go back to that hierarchy. Gentlemen, your job as a husband, as a wife, or if you're a single guy, you need to do this for yourself because someday God may give you a wife. But the question is, will you be prepared for the woman that God has for you? Remember we talked about that last week? Proverbs 31. This means yes. This means no. I'm a simple guy. I'm a ham and egger. Not a big deal. But our jobs, if you are a husband, if you are a dad, if you are a grandfather, our job is to protect, provide, and preside. That's it. Now, when I say preside, I don't mean that you are a dictator or a tyrant. It means God has chosen you to be the head. But it's incumbent upon us as men, we have to maintain that inner part of us. We have to work on those character traits and those qualities and those characteristics that make us like Christ. And if we don't, we are in trouble. If you are, again, if you're a husband, Maybe you don't have kids, but you have a wife that you need to watch over. If you have children, you have a wife and children. If you're a grandparent, hey, we may be grandparents, but guess what? We're still praying for those little duffers, huh? Yeah, absolutely. So if as a man, if you're taking the shortcut, you're not praying as you should, don't pray a 10-cent prayer and think you're going to get $1 million answer. Okay? Doesn't work that way. But if you're not being ethical, if you're not showing integrity, if you're not showing character, if you're not acting morally, there's a whole list of things that I could go down. But as the husband, as the head of the household, as I said, you're supposed to protect your family. If you don't do that, this is the kind of umbrella your family sits under. There are holes in it because you've not acted with character. You've not shown integrity. You've read or looked at something you shouldn't have. You've gone somewhere that you shouldn't have. You've been unethical. This is what your family stands under. This is a little tiny portable kind of umbrella. This is not the one I want my family under. I don't think it's the one that you want your family under. I think this is probably the one that most of us would prefer to have. Much larger, much better coverage. And all the ladies said, and all the guys said, oh, me. You don't want this. It's not where you want to go. But the choice is ours, men. What are we going to do? And see, remember when I was talking about Northrop Aviation and I said the higher you go? Okay, imagine you're Pastor Lynn. All of a sudden, he's got all of you as well. You need to pray for your pastor. It's not an easy job. Been there, done that, over 3 decades. This is not it. We'll just leave those for something to think about. Let's move on to number 3. Let's talk about community. Godly convictions, godly character, and God's people last forever. We'll live forever. I mean, we're not all going to heaven. I hope we're all going to heaven. I think you all are. I don't know. Can we delete that part? But you can't do this alone. You need to be in a community of believers. We prayed, Rodney prayed this morning. I don't know who the guy is that passed away, but I agreed with that prayer. There's community. We need people in situations to help us. Sometimes it's about 18 inches between a pat on the back and a kick in the rear. And we need both. Huh? Depending on the circumstance. Sometimes we need somebody to really come up and just, hey, get with the program. Quit being a doofus. And other times we need somebody to come along and encourage us. Here's a challenge for you, and I'm sure you've probably heard this before, but I'll remind you, catch people doing something good and tell them about it on the spot. I'll tell them in a week from now. No, do it then. Catch people doing stuff good. We don't have it all together. We're not all perfect, but we live this life. We can head in the right direction or get involved in a small group as well as attending church. I have up there the story of Mary and Martha. Remember that one? This is the one where Jesus comes to their house. He's going to have a meal there. Martha's in the kitchen, okay? Martha's chasing back and forth, making sure the pot roast is ready, the gravy's not going to be lumpy, the triple chocolate cake is going to be good, and the frosting's going to be right, and all that kind of stuff. And what's Mary doing? Sitting at Jesus' feet, listening to Jesus teach. And Mary gets a little bit miffed. The story says in Luke 10, 40 through 42, Martha was distracted by her many tasks. Don't get distracted by stuff. Be intentional. Be purposeful. So she came to him, meaning Jesus, and asked, Lord, do you not care? Can you hear the attitude that's kind of in Martha's voice? That my sister has left me to do all the work myself? I'm such a victim, God. Oh, it's awful. Tell her to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but there is need of only one thing, and Mary has chosen the better part. No, Martha? You can raise your hand, it's okay. Got a Martha in your house? You are Martha. Maybe. But I thought, that was a little bit of a harsh answer. That probably had to hurt. And Martha's upset because, God, Mary needs to be in the kitchen helping me with the green beans. Don't you know that? You supposedly are the Son of God. You know everything. And you don't even know this. But he's basically telling Martha, he's saying, you're missing the boat. The most important thing in life is worshiping God. Way too often we make life complicated. We make life difficult. We make life hard. Distracted by our many tasks. And what does God want from us? He wants us to worship him. That doesn't mean you can't go and sit out on a hill and just, you got to have a job. I mean, you got to be a normal person. But in the midst of all of that, our devotion should be towards God. How many times have you fussed and fumed over something and it didn't matter the next day or a month or a year later? It just didn't matter. But boy, at the moment, your kid wants to talk to you about something, but you are on your way, you're trying to get from A to B. My wife tells me I'm like a AAA kind of person. I'm not just an A, I'm a, And I can get that way. It's like, and she's the opposite end of the whole deal, which is good. Remember we talked about opposites, we attract, we're married to opposite kind of people. She didn't like me the first time she met me, which I really can't understand that. Obviously, the God of this world had blinded her eyes. But you shouldn't feel guilty about taking care of yourself. That's not evil. That's not wrong. The old thing on the airplane, when the oxygen masks come out, what do? Put your own on first. Take care of yourself. The people that build those sandcastles, they love the process more than the end result. They don't care that it gets washed away. They just like the fact that they're building these sandcastles and making this happen. We have 5 grandkids, and they all know when they come to Grandma's house, there's a high probability, a really high probability, they're going to be making chocolate chip cookies. And for those kids and my wife, it's all about the process. It's getting all the ingredients out of the cupboard, it's dumping them all in a bowl, it's mixing them up and all that kind of stuff. I'm all about the end result. I'm like, when does this happen? But the process is what we need to focus on because, as I said a couple of weeks ago, the process is the only thing that we can handle. I can't guarantee the end result of my spirituality. I can't guarantee that I will be spiritual, but guess what? I can control the process to get there, which means I read this every day and study this. I pray every day. I practice those character traits and qualities that Christ is trying to build into my life, that God is working on me on, that I'm following the leading of the Spirit. That's the process that I can control. I can't control the end result. I can't guarantee that I will be as spiritual as I would like to be, But I know the chances go up exponentially. If I do this stuff that I can control, there's a very high likelihood that I will become better spiritually, that I will grow more spiritually. God's Word, godly character, God's people. Those are the things that will last. Don't get distracted by all that outside stuff. As you know, there's a Saturday night service here. And I mentioned this last night. I talked about decision depletion. You're on a diet. You get up in the morning, have a bowl of oatmeal. Ate good. Didn't have a crawler or a donut or, something like that. And then for lunch, you have a salad. You're like, this is great. I'm doing really well. And then at 6 o'clock, you're in the drive-up at Burger King ordering everything off the menu. Been there? That's called decision depletion. Do you know why? Because you've made so many decisions during the course of the day, when you get to that end point, you're like, I don't want to make another decision. I don't want to have to think about this. I don't want to have to decide. So we take the easy route, the path of least resistance. We become like electricity or water, and we search for that path of least resistance. That's decision depletion. It's like we've used up all our decision making, and truthfully, we only have a certain amount of emotional capital each day. And when it's gone, it's gone. And you get up the next morning, and you start the whole process over again. If you have, Hebrews talks about a besetting sin. If you've got something that is a temptation that keeps sucking you in and keeps drawing you in, there are certain conditions where you are more susceptible to that sin. This is kind of part of that decision depletion. It may be at the end of the day. It may be in the middle of the day. There may be certain people, there may be certain environments that you get in, and you are more likely to succumb to that sin. You are more likely to give in to that than at any other time. If you can chart yourself and see when this happens, then you can prepare yourself in advance and go, okay, I know that. I'll ask this question. You keep your hand down. I'm talking to my wife. Any women in here like peanut M&Ms? Yeah, I got a wholesale, yep. But if you have a problem with that, you don't keep them in your house. If you're trying to avoid it. If you don't care, well, fine. Go buy the quadruple X bag at Sam's Club. I don't care. But what I'm saying is, don't put yourself in those positions where you can be tempted. Stay out of there. Build some guardrails around certain things. If you've got a weakness in a certain area, don't go there. You don't want this. Last of all, let's talk about the tests that we have to pass. Influence, affluence, and obedience. Number one, God has invested in each of you the ability to influence others, and He expects a return on His investment. What are you doing with your life? Are you being intentional with how you live, or are you just kind of flying along, doing whatever? This looks like it would be good to do on a Tuesday afternoon. Be intentional about how you live. Number two, if you're going to have an impact on eternity, consider how you spend your material resources. In perspective, it's not the amount that's in your bank account, it's what you do with what you've been given. Remember the widow's mite? She gave less than anybody, but she gave out of a sacrifice. There are people who have boatloads of money and they never give it away. They never help anybody. Then you read a story about some lady who was a scrub woman for 55 years, and she dies and they find $8.5 million stuffed in her mattress. Apparently I'm the only one that ever read that story or something like it. It's not how much you have, but what do you do with it? And then thirdly, 1,000 things you can do in life. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. You got to decide. Rick, my calling in life is to be the greatest Frisbee player on the planet. I don't think God created you for that. I think he's got a higher calling than that. Now, I'm not dismissing those people. There are those people out there. I'm just saying. And you have to decide, what skills do I have? What abilities do I have? You know, I can't go to Indianapolis in a couple of months and go through the same NFL combine that Carson Wentz went through last year and think I'm going to make an NFL team. You don't get a body like this eating at the salad bar. Okay? This is bacon cheeseburger country right here. Baked potatoes. We were at Texas Roadhouse with our granddaughter Friday. And every time I go there, they always ask you what you want in your baked potato. And it's, you know, it's always a lady waitress, not knocking anything. And I always go, I'm a guy, everything. Do you not know that? Huh? We want butter, we want sour cream, we want cheese, we want bacon, we want the whole load. I'm not going to pick and choose this deal. It's all of it. Huh? But we have to decide what we want to accomplish. And the question in all of this that you have to ask yourself, and this is the greatest self-coaching question I give to all my clients, when you're looking at making a decision and you're trying to decide, should I eat this, should I not eat this, should I work out today, should I not work out today, should I read my Bible, should I watch TV, you have to ask yourself, does this look like it belongs to the person I want to be? If I make this choice, if I make this decision, does this look like the person that I want to be? Because we all have a mental picture of our ideal self. Skinny, rich, and happy, right? But we do. We have that picture of, okay, if I was at the top of my game, so you ask yourself that question. Does this look like it belongs to the person I want to be? You have no idea how many times in preparing for these 3 weeks, because my office is in my home, you have no earthly idea how many times I would have loved to turn on ESPN and sit there for an hour and watch, but I'm like, that's not eternity. That's not an eternal decision. Whatever happened in the sports world today doesn't matter in comparison to what I bring to this pulpit Saturday night, Sunday morning. So unless you think I live on a celestial cloud somewhere and I don't struggle with this stuff, not so. But you need to say, okay, of what I have learned so far, what am I going to do with it? How will I apply this? Now, here's the last of the questions, and I had Lynette give everybody a copy. And again, so you can take it with you, and you can refer back to this during the course of the year, over the next, 10 months. 2 months are poof. Number 8 says, what's the most important way you will, by God's grace, try to make this year different from last year? How will it be different? I'm sure you don't want to live last year over again. Number 9, what one thing could you do to improve your prayer life this year? Remember, I always talked about it's the small little thing. It's not the big quantum leap. It's that one step done consistently that makes a difference. And then number 10, what single thing you plan to do this year will matter most in 5 years, 10 years, in eternity? Did you do anything, the previous slide said, this week that affected eternity? We will have weeks where we don't. I'm sorry. I'm just being honest. Again, we can't go through this and think we live every day. Impacting. You will have times where it's not much, and then all of a sudden you'll have a week and just like, bam, stuff happens. But you know why that happens? It's because you consistently accumulated those small steps over time, and all of a sudden God said, okay, let's open the floodgates here. We've sown the seeds, let's reap the harvest. It's that consistent little thing that you do every day, good or bad, determines Gentlemen, I'm praying that God wakes you up in the middle of the night and all you see are umbrellas. And I talk to guys a lot. And that's a hot spot for me, so I had to put some real tight boundaries around that, or we could have spent, till about 2 o'clock today going down that road. But it's kind of an unknown commodity a bit in today's world. But I've kind of made it a little bit of my life's mission. Chivalry will not die on my watch. And there are segments of culture and society where it has. Men have wimped out. They've chickened out. They've lost their backbone. And they haven't stood up and done what a man needs to do and be what a man needs to be. Everybody's looking for a safe place on a college campus because someone disagreed with me. That's why they never let me on college campuses to speak. I get we all have difficulty. I understand that. But you don't get better by hiding from it. You get better by fighting through it and moving on. I've got one last scripture I'm going to share. We'll sing a song, and then I'll come back and share that, and we'll tie all of this up, okay?